She usually introduces the speaker of the day, but Diane is in another classroom far, far away. She's in Long Beach with a classroom full of first graders substituting. So give her a silent way to go, Diane. So she asked if I would introduce Jim, and it's absolutely my pleasure to do so. I feel like he probably doesn't need much introduction to most of you. The way I feel about Jim is he's ubiquitous. Every time I have a question about almost anything, I call Jim. and he always knows the answer. It's wonderful. So Jim grew up here on the peninsula, and he's a peninsula kid. And he's only been off the peninsula. He was born in 1955. You can do the math. And he's only been, what?
I'm laughing.
Oh. And he has only been gone from the peninsula for about 10 years, he told me, when he was in school, mostly going to school, getting a whole lot of degrees. He went to Evergreen. I even wrote a note or two, but I don't know if I can read them, where he got a degree in, he was in liberal arts, then he got a degree in science, then he went to, I don't know if this is right order exactly, but he went to UC Irvine and got a degree in
Master's in biology.
In biology, right? And then I looked at his Facebook page, so we know how that is. But he studied and took classes in a variety of places, like, special programs, mostly science related, and some policy related. And I don't know what that means, but I do know that since Jim has been a working man for the last, 30 years or so, he has had a variety, has had a checkered career, we'll say, but all of his jobs have related to, in some way, Pacific County. He's worked for the city of Long Beach, he's worked for the county itself. Right now, see how I say right now? I don't know if this is your last job or not, Jim, but right now he is executive chairman of the EDC. He's worked for the State Historical Society, but as a liaison from this area, Jim is largely responsible for the development of Middle Village by St. Mary's Church out on the river. He's just done lots of things, and along the way, he's interested in everything. And it doesn't matter if it's the history of roads or whatever. So I wondered when I heard he was going to talk today, what in the world he would talk about. And lucky us, he's going to talk about growing up local. So with that, Jim, please.
Thank you. Is it okay to sit down? Is that all right? When I was talking with Sydney and Diane and then Sydney, I sort of wondered what to talk about because it would be easy for me to talk about my work and economic development, land use planning, public policy, the areas that I've worked in for 30 years. But I got thinking about it, and I'm of course a history buff, and the stories we miss are the stories of the past. And sometimes it's the only way to capture them. So then I thought, well, I'll talk about the stories of growing up and here on the beach. And I told Sydney, so many of these stories are triggered by senses, and sound is a big one. So I thought, well, I'll use sound as the cue for some of the stories. And so I wrote like 34 cues, things that I remember. And I said to Sydney, should I tip them off or spring it on them? She says, go ahead and spring it on. So some of them are funny, some of them you in the audience who I've known for years, 50 years plus, many of you in the audience. So I apologize if you hear something in there and goes, oh, what the heck is he talking about? Well, that could happen. We all grow up differently. But I thought I would start with a title called Beginning at the End. And this means a lot to me because how do you know when you have stopped growing up local? which is a thing of youth and age. And I know to the date, literally, I was in my late 20s, and I was coming home from some adventure, long place away, who knows, you know, and I pulled into my parents' yard, and I apologize if I get a little teary-eyed on this. I pulled into my parents' yard. And normally when I would pull in, I'd open the door, jump in the car, run to the front door, hi mom, hi dad, you know, I'm home, you know. For some strange reason, I pulled into the yard and I stopped and turned the key off, and I looked to the left out the window, and I didn't move. And the house was framed by this beautiful blue sky we get in the summer with the tall spruce trees behind it, and the wind was rustling through those big leaves of the western red alder, and the lawn was mowed, and I could smell it, you know, I could sense it. And off to the right, where Dad always cleaned his fish, because when he was retired, he loved to go fishing with Riley Moore, their postmaster in Long Beach. And there were 3 clean salmon laying there, and I knew the barbecue was going in the back. And I froze, because I realized I'd come home, and that my parents had created this beautiful place, and that I just was so remarkable at what they had given us and what I had received. And the irony was, I knew I could never experience that again as long as I lived. And that was the benchmark, and that was the end of, you know, a youth, essentially, because I'd become an adult at that point. And I'd experienced enough of life to know the difference. And so that memory will be with me forever. But a couple of cute vignettes about what it really means to sort of grow up in terms of the isolation and the difference of the beach, say in the 60s. When I was in the 6th grade, my friend John Barta, who lived at the North Head Lighthouse lightkeeper's quarters for a while, because back in the day, the sheriff's deputies lived there, and his father was a sheriff's deputy. My friend John and I took music lessons at the middle school there in Long Beach. And he was learning how to play the trombone, and I was learning how to play the French horn. Sounds crazy, but it's true. And our parents wanted us to learn. And so we would, after school was out about 3:30, we would stay for an hour and a half and practice playing the French horn and trombone. And then our parents would pick us up. And John's mom picked him up in like a 53 Studebaker, which I remember clear as a bell. It's a beautiful old car. And my mom picked me up in a 56 Ford Ranch wagon. Nice little car. And then we drove from Long Beach to Ocean Park on the front road. We didn't call it State Highway, it was called the front road, and Sandridge was called the back road. That's true. That's true. We always went down to Oahu and over to Astoria and up to Portland or Seattle or something like that. But anyway, from Long Beach to Ocean Park, not one car passed us going the other direction. This is in the fall, probably late fall. It was probably, you know, in the evening and getting dusk. Not one single car passed us going the other direction. Not one. This is about 67? Not one car. But the other funny side of it is, if a car had passed us, there was a high probability I knew the owner of the car and the person in the car, where they lived. That's the way it was. And the other funny vignette was my father worked at the shellfish lab there in Nakata, now called the Nakata Field Station, and he received a UPS package addressed to Clyde Sayce's mother-in-law, Ocean Park. No zip code, no nothing. And my experience was more weird in that I was going to school at Evergreen, and I would always bring my friends down to the beach from college. And so one day I'm at Evergreen, they're talking, and they say to me, Jim, we went and visited your parents. We have the funniest story to tell you. We're coming up the Oregon coast, we crossed the bridge, and we're on the south end of the peninsula down on the Columbia River, south end of the county. You go, we didn't quite remember where your parents lived, so we pulled off in Chinook and asked somebody. And the response was this, oh, Bonnie and Clyde. My parents' names were Bonnie and Clyde. Oh, Bonnie and Clyde. They live up north, I think Ocean Park. Go up the state highway or whatever. They'll go up back then they probably said, go to Long Beach and take the road up to Ocean Park. So they took the road through Oahu up to Long Beach. They stopped at Long Beach and they said, do you know where Bonnie and Clyde live? Oh, Bonnie and Clyde Sayce, yeah, they live up in Ocean Park. I think they live right at the light, but I'm not sure. Stop at Jack's. And so then they drove up to Jack's and they went in, oh yes, Bonnie and Clyde, they live over towards Nakata, just across from the Wagert steam plant. That's how they describe where you live, not by a street address, not by anything other than that. So that's sort of, it gives you an essence of, place and how you relate to the large thing. And so I'm going to talk about some stories from my very early youth, very early memories. My parents had a beautiful rocker with very nice wood-toned arms, sort of shaker style, black rocker runners, and an ugly gray vinyl seat thing. I don't know how that got ugly gray, but the color of the chair there, basically. My mom rocked me to sleep. Dad rocked me. I remember the sound of that rocker. So whenever I said a rocker today, I just remembered that, falling asleep in my mom's arms or my father's arms. And my mom's voice could put me to sleep like that. I'd be sitting on the front porch and she'd start talking and I'd come down. Now later in life, she probably didn't appreciate that. Maybe I mentally tuned her out occasionally, but it's weird how when you're really young, the voices and the sounds really resonate with you. And she was a great lover of, what you might call show tunes, She loved the South Pacific. She loved Oregon Bess. She loved Rachmaninoff. She loved, Oklahoma. Any of those great era, Oh My Fair Lady. So she would play those all the time when we were really young. And so nowadays when I hear that music, I hear it deep in my soul. I don't hear it as if I first heard it, I hear it really deeply. And that just really does affect me. And I have a weird love of classical music because of that. I can't really explain. Oh, she loved Tchaikovsky, and she played Peter Wolf all the time, My dad had a 53 Ford Flathead, and it came into life doing a couple of funny things, but one of them was it put me to sleep. And Mom said occasionally he'd drive you around town to get you to knock out, so I'd go to sleep. But here's the weird thing. My grandparents lived in Centralia, Washington. The other set of grandparents lived in the Wallingford district of Seattle. And so I remember these trips when I was really young that we would go to Seattle up Highway 101 and come back, and we were always coming back late at night. And so I would be sound asleep until the car came to the end of Highway 6 and stopped there at the turn in Raymond. I would wake up, look around, go back to sleep. And I always woke up at the intersection of Sandridge and Bay Avenue because we would go the back road, and the car would come to a complete stop, and my head would pop up, and my eyes would, and I'd wake right up. And I knew that, that was the sound of sort of coming back to the beach, which was always special. We lived in Ocean Park on what nowadays you would call Ridge Avenue and 263rd. Back then we just called it Ridge and Monroe. And Ridge runs on the east side of Jack's Country Store. So I grew up in that house there on the corner lot, and it was 240 feet from the fire siren. So when the fire siren would go off, it would just wake you up and of course I felt really sorry for Carol Jack Wagner, who lived right next to us to the south, where Nancy lives right now. And then Ed Chalice, who lived right across the street from the fire district, was fire siren. It was like right next door, and it absolutely light you up. But my funniest story about the fire siren is that, this is what I remember. So Larry Ewald took over the barber shop from Mr. Poe. So I was about 12 or 13. You all remember this probably. And so Larry Ewald was the barber there. And so I went uptown, and my mom dropped me off. I don't really remember, because we eventually moved out to Bay Avenue and Z Street. And so I'm sitting there in the barber chair getting my hair cut, and Larry's about half done with me. Siren goes off. I'm not thinking too closely. I'm thinking, oh, well, just keep cutting my hair. Puts down his clippers, takes his smock off, sets it down, boom, out the door. And I'm sitting there, tape around my neck, smock over me. My little 13-year-old brain going, I know where those special magazines are in the rack. I wonder if I should sneak over there and look at them. I'm sitting there wondering, what the heck, I waited there for 45 minutes. Until he came back. They put the fire out, and he came back, and boom, there it was. Pretty funny, yeah. Of course, we lived through the October 12th storm, and I was going to talk a little bit about winds, and I have them scattered throughout my talk. I might talk about them all at once, I don't know, but the storm winds are interesting. Those are the winds that come out of the south-southwest. And as I got older, I put pieces together by my late 20s about how these winds work, and those big storms that come out of the Gulf of Alaska have enormous long fetch
So that means those winds are very powerful, way out at sea in the Pacific Ocean, and they drive these swells of great depth and breadth into the south of the beach. Because the wind's out of the south and those waves are really big, they come across as a deep, thunderous sound. I mean a deep, thunderous sound. And you can hear that better if you're on the middle of the beach peninsula, not right on the ocean, because there's so much sound on the ocean, sometimes you can't discern sound. But if you're on the middle of the peninsula somewhere, or if you're on the west side of Long Island, and the storm's coming in, you can hear it plain as day. Plain as day, because that deep, deep, low pitch. And it gets really low sometimes, really low. Now, and I don't know if anybody's talked about this, but when the wind shifts to the west, that's what we call the glass ball wind. And it can stay west for several days, very strong. It's almost as if the wind feels more in your face and more fresh, because the peninsula is only a mile wide, and so that wind comes at you and you really do feel it. And we call those glass ball winds. It's because that's what drove all the glass balls ashore. And so that I remember a fateful Sunday morning when we were getting ready for church, and my father says to my mom, glass ball wind. And I didn't know what was that. I'm just a little kid. We were probably about 6 or 7 about that. My sister might have been 8 or 9. I might have been 6. Cindy was 5, 4 and a half, like that. Well, we're all going to church. Dad pulls up in front of the Methodist church and stops, and he says, "Say, how about if I take the kids out on the beach and go look for glass balls?" And we're all granted a reprieve. We're thinking, I don't have to listen to the bell ring or anything. We can just go out on the beach. And he was driving our 53 Ford at the time. And Mom was sort of resigned. Okay, she gets out, goes to church. We take off. And we go down the beach all the way to Oysterville. My dad driving like a maniac. And we'd see a glass. One of his kids would go out and grab it. We'd jump in the back seat. We'd come back an hour and a half later. And there we are sitting in the back seat with our arms wrapped around these big glass balls. We got about 5 of them in an hour. And my mom opens that door and she sees these 3 kids, her eyes just beaming and big grins. She probably thought we were lost to religion for the rest of our life. My mom went to Chicago in the late 50s to visit her great aunt. And she did something you cannot do today. Mr. Peterson lived north of us 1 block on the other side of the Seventh-day Adventist church. And he drove the stage. They didn't call it the bus, they called it the stage. The Ocean Park stage. The Ocean Park stage that he drove would make a daily trip to Longview and back and brought the mail. And the mail came into the Ocean Park post office, which was just north of the pharmacy there, about half a block. And Dobby, forgive me, all the old men would gather around the stage and they'd want to get the newspaper from Longview or from the Oregonian or the Seattle Times that had been delivered to Longview, because he brought all mail in the afternoon. And they all wanted to know what the news was. So they would be standing around there waiting for the stage to show up. He picked my mother, and that had it's a Beetleback GMC bus, sort of a nice rounded back, and had a diesel engine, just roared. And I remember that going by our house all the time, because he'd leave in the morning, come back in the evening up the ridge. And my mom went to Chicago. This is how she went to Chicago. She got up one morning, all her gear was packed, stepped out the front door, the bus stopped, picked her up, took her to Longview. She got on probably the old Starlight, Coast Starlight, took the train into Seattle at King Street Station, and then took the train to Chicago. You can't do that today. She didn't have to drive a car 1 inch. Isn't that remarkable? That was in the 50s, probably 58, 59. That was really cool. The other thing in Ocean Park, when we lived there, were the Ocean Park peacocks. Does anybody remember this story? Okay. There was a World War I vet. His name eludes me. I just heard his name spoken a few days ago. I apologize. I'll have to get it for you. He was supposedly breathed enough mustard gas in France during World War I. He couldn't speak very well. Now, mind you, this is in the late 50s and early 60s, so he would have been a 60-some-year-old vet by then. He drove a little motorcycle around town, old Honda Dream, like a 160 Honda Dream, something like that. And he kept these big enclosures. I think there were 6 of them. They were together all, maybe the size of the room, but each one was a little smaller, and he kept peacocks in those. Real peacocks. Have you ever heard a peacock caw? And we would hear that in the evening all over Ocean Park. Those peacocks screaming, you know. And everyone would laugh about it, thinking, I'm glad we don't live next to them. But they're beautiful birds, but that sound would reverberate because the wind would push it, depending on which way the wind was going. My father was a square dance caller. So he called square dance. And he learned from Joan Sontag. And they had a square and circle club, was local. And I'm trying to remember some of the names of the dance. It's been so many years. The Sontag, the Flags, the Von Prices, the Stacy's, the Everharts. They would get together and they would usually dance at the old community center in Seaview or the Ocean Park School. And what I remember, he had a very nice voice. Mom said he'd come alive on stage. You didn't normally see him at the dinner table like that, but boy, when he got up there and called, he really enjoyed it. Here's what I remember about him. He had a magnetic board on the size of this sheet of paper, and it had 8 magnetic dancers that would stick to it, figurines, and there were men and women, so there was 4 couples, right? And he would sit in his easy chair in the evening, and he would look at this like this, and he'd look at this magnetic board, and he would start to move the dancers around like this. And I remember the scratching of, you know, because he was sliding them. He would scratch the board. It was magnetic, so they wouldn't fall off. And what he was doing was designing calls, called hash calling. And Dad could call on the fly, so he could link different dance moves together. And then he would challenge the dancers. You had to be a really good dancer, because you had to think of what the move was, the call. You go left, right, you know, Brandon left, right, Alaman left. So block your partner, I can't remember all the calls. I used to know quite a few of them. And so one time he's calling, and I'll never forget this. And we used to go over and listen to him in the Ocean Park School, and they would start late. I want to say they started 8 or 9, and they would call till late. I want to say he and Joanne would trade off. They'd call 11:30, sometimes midnight. So he's calling this one hash call, and Ed Bonner-Price bellows out, "Damn you, Clyde!" You know, because he mixed the move up, you know, and then he had to go get Lucille and get her back where he was supposed to be. That was a lot of fun. That was pretty cool. And he took classes in calling. It was a part of him that was just so wonderful. One of our neighbors, is Gary Wilson come and talk, you know? Gary Wilson? No? Oh, God. Okay. I have some great stories about Gary. A couple stories, but he had I think it was a 55 Chev with a 327 4-speed in it. And some of the language I'm going to use, you're going to say, Jim, are you a closet gearhead? Well, yeah, I like machinery. But remember, their sounds on the beach are made up of sounds that are both mechanical and natural, pretty much, you know. And so this was a mechanical sound. He would test that Chev out on the back road, basically, from Dobby Sr.'s house to his driveway, or his driveway to Dobby Sr.'s house. And we were, of course, living by that time in John Weiker's house there on the Bay Avenue Sandwich, and my room was on the upper floor on the east side, and I could hear him ripping off from his driveway all the way to the intersection of Bay Avenue and Sandwich, slam on the brakes, turn around, go back the other direction. That's what he was doing all the time, testing that car out. One time we're having a barbecue outside the backyard of our house there, and we're sitting in the backyard, and we heard him go, Ocean Park, and that Chev just roared. And then he comes back the other direction, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden we hear this funny sound, like, you know, what was that? We get up there, and he lost a wheel right in front of our house. And the car hit a Huey in the road and broke the axle, the wheel went off in the brush. And he lost a hood one time on the front road, down by Midway, the hood of the car. And I swear, one of his friends, and I don't know who it was, played a joke on him, and the joke was there for 15 years. That 55 Chev hood was black, and somebody wrote on the top of it, Gary Wilson's hood. And stuck it up on the side of the road, and it stayed there for over 10 years. That was the funniest thing. Oh my God. My dad had a big international travel for a while, and you know, you're close to your parents, but I didn't realize till years later how close I was to my dad in some cases. I would not go to sleep until he came home.
And sometimes he had to go to Olympia for his work. And so I would lie in bed waiting for him to come home. Just wide awake. And it didn't matter if it was 10:30, 11, 11:30 at night. I'd lie there. And I'd hear this. And your ears are really good when you're a kid. And I'd hear this truck coming down the road. And I go, I bet you that's that International. Then I could hear him apply the brakes. They squeaked in just the right manner, And then it had a 3-speed transmission, so we made the turn and accelerated up the road. And then I heard it turn into our driveway, and our driveway was oyster shell. And I could hear the tires crunch, 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 and I knew he was home, and fall asleep right then. That's, yeah. Of course, I was in the Boy Scouts, and Dobby will remember some of these stories. I can't tell them all, but ask me how much I've sung Kumbaya. I've probably sung Kumbaya 100 times, right, Eric? Maybe 1,000 times. Because Herman would pack his guitar with him everywhere, and we'd always, go a-wandering and Kumbaya just come right back to me. And of course, we all would sing, because he made us sing, and that was Herman. And he was our scoutmaster, and spoke with a heavy, heavy German accent. Even though he lived in the country since, 25 or 26, so he still spoke with it. And I could regale you on all sorts of Herman stories. Unfortunately, I can't do that because, time is a wasting. But he would also do one oddball thing, which I didn't figure out till years later after conversation with my father. I could never figure out where Herman got these parachutes for our tents in Boy Scouts. We didn't have normal tents. We never had a normal tent. The only time we got to stay in a real tent was when we went to Camp Delsey. All the other days, when we went camping on the weekends, we slept under a parachute held by one tall pole. Remember, Dobby? Tall pole. And the pole was probably about 12, 14 feet to pull the parachute up. Well, if you remember, parachutes are designed to inflate going down. They have a really rounded look, and ours looked like a very poor copy of an Indian teepee, which meant it sagged. And then when it got wet, it really sagged. And one time we were up Salmon Creek in a storm, and it got really wet. It was really windy, and the tent would go poof, like this. And it would fill up with air, and then it would snap back. And all that water that had sucked into it for like 10 hours would come down on us. And it was like we were living inside our personal little rainstorm that rained outside. That was really, really, really common. We had horses for forever.
Wait a minute, did you find out where you got the parachute?
Yes. So, back in the days of the Cold War, the U.S. Air Force had a distant early warning station on Radar Ridge. That's what we called the Nasal Ridge, Radar Ridge back then. And as a consequence of that, the U.S. Air Force would send down its pilots or captains to the peninsula for survival training. And they would go to the end of the peninsula, Ledbetter, and they would be up there for 10 days to 2 weeks, and they were basically doing survival training like what it would be to bail out over Russia, coast of Russia. And so they stopped by the lab one day, this is probably in the early 60s, and started talking with my father. He was a Navy vet, and Dad said, hey, if you guys are coming out of Ledbetter Point after a couple weeks, stop by the lab, and we got showers there and a place to dry your clothing and sort of get yourself back in shape to go back to McChord Air Force Base. And so he started doing that, and they gave Dad all of their spare parachutes. So we ended up with parachutes. But I didn't know that because Dad never showed them to me. He gave them to Herman, and that's where our source. And they were white with orange stripes, as I recall, or white panel, orange panel, white panel, orange panel. And we had them for years, and Herman was crazy that way. We one time, Dean Ellsworth was asleep, and we were camped at the Methodist camp for some reason under the parachute, and Dean slept really well. And so we were waiting for him to wake up, and he wouldn't wake up for whatever reason, so he said, hey, let's take down the parachute. And he won't know it, and we'll probably wake him up. We left him there. We took down that parachute, pulled the pole out, pulled all the stakes out, packed up everything, and left. We knew we didn't have very far to walk home, so it was no big deal, but the parachute was wonderful stories. We had horses for a long, long time. At any one time, we had about 2.
And initially, they were my sister's horses. I didn't get into horses till later. But anybody here own horses?
She only wanted to.
They are. My mom said they're like giant German Shepherd dogs. Which is true. They love you to death, but they have a mind of their own.
Yeah.
So when I worked on our cranberry farm for years, and I would go out and check the pumps in the evening for frost protection. Or I just wander out just for some fun, just check things out, So one evening, really cold, been cold for probably 6-7 days. The ground is frozen. Of course, I told Sydney the story so she gets to smile because she knows what I'm talking about. So I go down by the shop, and then I have about a 600-foot walk, and it's really dark. There's no moon out, but all the light that I get is from the residual light from the barn and the shop and the house, and so I'm walking in the dark on the road. It's really frozen. I'm wandering down there by myself. And of course, our horses have free run of everything. I'm wandering around. Can't see the thing. I can sort of see the meter of the pump house because the meter glows. And all of a sudden, I heard this funny sound. Oh, what's that sound? And I can't see anything. And then I heard this drop. Uh-oh. The road is only 25 feet wide. And I know instantly there's horses coming at me, and I can tell they're picking up speed. So I jump off the road in the brush. Boom! These horses go by. Their names were, let's see, that they were, gosh, I think their names at that point. They were Tex and Grand Valor, I think were the names. GV, we called him. He was a purebred Arab, beautiful, speckled white and silver Arab. By the time they went by me, they're going about 30 miles an hour. Horses can really look. They are really fast. And the ground is frozen. I could hear those hoofbeats because they're pounding. They're accelerating, they're pounding, and they're going. So they had a 600, 700-foot run to the shop. That's a 90-degree turn. They don't care. They make the 90-degree turn at full gallop. Then there's a slight rise to a copse of trees, or, with a narrow roadway between the trees. And I'm thinking, they'll stop and walk through the trees. No. Horses hate trees because of cougars and bears. Instinctively, they do not like dark, narrow spaces. And I could hear them accelerate up the hill because they knew where they were coming into. And they blasted right through those trees into another pasture. And I could hear every hoofbeat and pounding this frozen ground. And so I took off running after them because I was curious, what the heck are they going to do? Because they only have 800 feet of pasture to run, then they're going to run out of room, and what are they going to, they're not going to come back. So I ran up after them, and when I got up there, they had swung around the barn, full speed, and they had turned around, and they were looking back to where they had come. And so I come walking out of the darkness, lit by these vague, barn lights, and GV stands like this, and I could barely see him, puts his hoofs down like this, arches his back, puts his head down, and blows out of his 2 nostrils. That is a true offensive posture of an Arab. Just like, and I can hear it, see these sort of misty nostril plumes like a dragon. Oh, it was amazing. And he was basically telling me to back off because he thought I was a threat because they were running away from bears or, whatever, the wolves, coyotes, cougars, who knows. So I started talking. And as soon as they realized it was me, they'd walk up. What are you doing up here? That's horses. And they were great learners too. They taught us so many things. So we were working on the fence. We kept the horses at Joanne Sontag's pasture working on the fence there. And Dad or Kathleen came out. I remember working there. We had a 56 Ford pickup, which I rode a lot. But this one time, I always wondered why the horses would meet us when they got fed. I knew they didn't have wrist watches and they weren't time sensitive that way. So why are the horses always meeting us at the right place at the right time? So I heard this 56 Ford coming down the road because I recognized it and it had a squeaky fender on it. Go, and those horses' ears go, boop. And they look over there and I don't even see the truck, and pretty soon the truck goes down and they take off and boom, they run right down and they meet the truck at the corner and then pace it as the truck comes up Joanne's driveway until Kathleen would stop and we would feed them. They were so smart. That's the way they knew things about us that we didn't know. One other interesting sort of Gary Wilson story, but it has to do with anybody. It could have been the Andrews brothers. Who the heck knows? They all knew this. Does anybody here, I don't know, Dobby, do you remember the drag strip that was painted on the back road north of Joe John's Road? So, okay.
I remember that.
Yeah, so there was a red mark in the road. It said start and finish. It was a quarter mile. Okay. And so one time we were sitting at my mom's stepdad's place, Joe Rao there, having dinner. And there was a natural conversation going on like dinner. All of a sudden we heard this car wind up, just take off, tires screaming, and Joe says, "Home. Probably one of the Andrews boys, you know? He's testing out the drag strip." And Joe lived just far enough away, we couldn't see it because there was a hill between us and them, but you could hear that sound everywhere. And that was the young guys of the 60s testing out their muscle cars. And that thing stayed paved, for years. I remember when I got back here in the early 80s, it was still there, and then they paved over it and it no longer exists. I should go back and paint it just for old times. That wind that I talk about would carry sound everywhere, and one of the most beautiful sounds I remember of all, being in Ocean Park, and then when we moved to Bay Avenue there, and what was called Rushlight Road. There was a dairy down called Rushlight Dairy, so we called it Rushlight Road. Now it's Z Street, right across from Herrick's Gallery, was the operations of the cannery, the Wagert steam plant, we called it. And Shorty Reynolds, I believe, ran the boiler. And they blew the whistle, I guess, 4 times a day. I think they blew at 8, and I was talking with Eric, probably 8, 12, 1, and either 4 or 5 o'clock. And that tone of that whistle was, woo, and you could hear it everywhere. Everywhere. I remember playing in the Ocean Park schoolyard hearing the whistle, the beautiful whistle. And what made that's a sound you'll never hear again. And the most amazing thing about that whistle is that was the old train whistle from the old clamshell railroad whistle. So it was like a memory from the past. Beautiful, beautiful tone. And I worked in that cannery on cleanup crew with Ken Kissel. And so I remember many of the operations, the mechanical operations of that plant. And I was 14 back then. You were allowed to work at the age of 14. I worked swing, I worked 12 to midnight. I start usually in May, and sometimes I work in September, so I'd have a couple periods in the late school era and then early in the fall. And I remember, I cleaned the opening room, I cleaned the hopper room, and everything associated with that. Ken cleaned all of the cooking machinery. Everything was run by steam. And the opening room had a big steam chamber where all the oysters came in. And those oysters were steamed, and it made it easier for the oyster owners to open them. And then the steamed oysters, they were made into oyster stew. And I don't know, Dobby, were they cooked at that point? I just don't remember. Or were they cooked in the steam?
The steamed oysters went into cans.
Went into cans.
Oyster stew oysters were opened fresh.
Okay.
And then
some of those things I didn't remember. I do remember I had a radio in the far end of the hopper room. And I remember listening to the long, cool woman in a black dress while I hosed down the hopper room. I just remember that clear as a bell. And I remember the conveyor running. The conveyor ran all the way through the opening table out the far end. And it was a little that chink, 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 chink sound. I remember that very clearly. It was just a lot of fun. And then I wore hip boots. And back then we all wore like a Uniroyal brand, as I recall. It had little fasteners on both sides. And you could fasten the loops into your belt loops or a belt. None of us ever did that. I never saw any guy who ever did that before. But the weird thing was when you walked, it would make this little jingly sound. Jingly. You could hear it when you walked. Tingly, tingly, tingly. I just imagine that was the oysterman's version of spurs, because it was such a noticeable sound. The summer winds were different. I mean, they come from 2 directions, the northwest, and because the winds out of the northwest come what's called the Pacific high pressure area. It's really close to us, so the swells and waves aren't as big, and so the surf has a higher pitched tone to it. It's really noticeable. I could step out of my porch and I could tell you, tomorrow will be a nice day because the wind's out of the northwest, it's high pitched, I hear the high surf. Or the reverse is, the wind's out of the south-southwest, it's lower pitch, a big storm coming in. You can sense that after 50 years, you just sort of learn to associate that. But the wind would move sounds that normally you couldn't hear. And I remember being in Ocean Park and hearing the Methodist camp bell. And that bell was used for bringing assembly at the Methodist camp. And it was not very high off the ground. I want to say it was 6 feet off the ground, big bell, about yay big. And when they would clang that thing, if the wind was just right, you could hear that bell ring all the way into Ocean Park. So you knew that they were being called to assembly about a mile away. That was a really, really beautiful sound. And other sounds that were so amazing had to do with being on the water on the bay, because when it was really calm and the bay is really flat, that sound would bounce right off that water and just travel amazing distances. Nick Tarter and I were camped at Diamond Point one time, and Diamond Point is the north point there of Long Island. It's right across from Nakata. And back in the day, we'd go there on the gravel beaches, and there was a campground there, and Boy Scouts, we'd camp there and dig clams. So he and I are camped there, and it's like 5 in the morning, so it must have been in the summer, like July or August, or maybe it was early, 4:30. I'm woken up by the sound of men talking and the clanking of chain. And so I look out the tent. About a half mile away, maybe a little farther, there's an oyster dredge working. And I could hear the men plain as a day talking as they were picking probably tubs out of the water or dragging a dredge. It's just far enough I couldn't tell. But that sound would reverberate off the water. And those of you that live near the water in the bay, you'll notice that when you have an east wind, because that east wind will bring that sound to you, and it's a lot easier to hear. And those winds can extend into the fall, into the Indian summer periods, if it's really nice. And the winds in the 60s and 70s, because they did so much slash burning in the timberlands, the winds would blow all of that ash in the upper atmosphere out to sea, and we have these incredible auburn sunsets because of all of that, what now you would call it smog, out over the Pacific Ocean. I haven't seen that for decades, really common. That wind would also bring with it, if you had a really good set of ears. I remember being at the Nakata dock. You had a really good set of ears, you could hear the whistle punks in the Nema. Now, you know what a whistle punk is? Whistle punk is a guy working with the yarding crew, the choker centers, and he's hitting the little, back then it was a little radio device that would trigger a whistle on the yarding machine. So they're highly logging with the yarder, and so you'd hear this and that would carry across the water 6, 7, 8 miles, because it's so calm. And what he was signaling is he's telling the yarder to stop or pull or let out or whatever their code was. And so you would hear this sound come out of probably the Nema, because that would be the closest area that they would have been logging. And it was a reminder about how logging used to be done. Very, very sort of poignant sound that you'll never, I don't think we'll ever hear that much again, because nowadays they have much different devices that they use. I was really fortunate to really love kayaking and canoeing, so I've kayaked and canoed all over the bay, but I have one very favorite story of that. It was a high tide in the summer, around midnight with a full moon. It was probably an 8, 9 foot tide, and we're up Sawlog Slough, and I decided for some reason that we're going to go out at midnight, and there's an old dike around there where they dug a channel, and so you can sneak around that channel in a canoe and come back in Sawlog. And so I thought we'd do that, and so we're coming back in Sawlog, and I'm really careful on how I'm paddling my, I don't know if I had kayak paddles or canoe paddles with my big canoe, but we were with a couple other friends, and I said, hey, we need to be really quiet, we don't know what we're going to see here, because I had no idea, but you might see something special. I hear something. There's something over there. And then I accidentally whacked my paddle against the side of the boat. And all of a sudden I hear this commotion, this incredible commotion. And I couldn't figure out what I was listening to. Well, I'm thinking, wow, what would make all that noise? And I go, well, maybe it's a herd of elk. Oh, it's a herd of elk. They're out in the mud flat, 6 inches of water, and they're running and trotting through this water. And so what I'm hearing is their feet go as they go through the water. And then they're picking up speed like the horses. And I think, what's going to happen when they hit tree line? Well, elk don't care when they hit tree line. It sounded like a caterpillar going up through the woods, breaking branches and twigs, and how they got up there. And we had spooked probably 25, 30 head of elk out on the marsh, and they ran off the marsh up into the forest of Long Island.
And I'm sure you can still hear that in the right times if you ever want to do that. I think it's really possible. Other animal sounds I heard constantly at our house was Dobby Sr. kept cows. The cows would moo. And then my bedroom was like 100 feet from where they mooed. And they would moo and moo and moo. And I think, why are they mooing? Are they lonely or what? And then, to replace the cows were the coyotes. And they loved that field. And they would hang out there. And I used to think it was like 15 coyotes. Coyotes make all this sound. And one day I figured out it was like 2. 2 coyotes sound like a gang of teenagers out the brush. They would howl and howl and howl at the moon. It was a lot of fun to listen to them. And the other animal sounds I remember are the robins and the Swainson's thrushes. I don't know if you guys know. Robins will sit really high in a spruce tree or a pine tree, and the male will tweet up there, sort of a innocuous tweet, but a beautiful tweet. But the Swainson's thrush is absolutely a beautiful ascending trill. Absolutely gorgeous. Only matched by the little winter wrens who live in your wood piles, and they're the size of a ping pong ball, and they'll tweet and tweet and tweet all day long. And we had birds too. We had banty roosters. I have a funny story about the banty roosters because one of the roosters my sister named Dog Meat because he's always chasing the dog away from the dog dish. He was very aggressive, a banty rooster. But when we would leave the house in the morning for school, the front yard would be littered with things like pet rocks and bookends and all sorts of things. So I remember coming home one evening and saying, what's with all the stuff in the front yard? Well, it was my sister Kathleen trying to knock that banty rooster off the Temeria tree, which was 4 feet from her window. And he would start crowing when the moon came up, when the garage light was turned on, when the sun came up, and she would knock him out of the tree. And that's why all the stuff was on the lawn. Pretty good. Speaking of animals and trees, so when I was on the farm one day, I was wandering around and went down one of our roads that I built, minding my own business, and I came face to face with a mom bear and 2 cubs. And so I just booked right out of there, and I just left. And thank you. I just left, and the sound that I heard when I turned away was the sound of hundreds of pieces of spruce bark being ripped off the spruce tree. And what was happening is she turned and barked at those 2 cubs, and those 2 cubs went up that tree so fast, they just ripped the bark off, and they went 100 feet up to where they really couldn't climb anymore. And then by this time, I'm like 100 feet away, or 150 feet away, so I know she's not going to chase me. And she barked at them for an hour and a half trying to get them down, because they had gone so high. And every now and then I've noticed that there are older trees, because their bark is soft, that have claw marks in them. And if you really look at some of these bigger trees that look bear huggable size, about this big, you'll see the claw marks on them. The bears will climb those trees. Very, very interesting. And some of the sounds I've noticed are when we would go hunting up in the Nacelle Ridge area. It was very quiet up there because there's no sounds of human existence. It's just the tall hemlocks and the tall firs. And so the sounds you tend to hear are that high-pitched sound or rustling sound of the winds in the trees. And you don't hear anything else. In some ways, it's a lot purer because of that. It's very fascinating. Other sounds that I remember are more poignant. I remember I was at the port one time, and I heard the sound of the gill knitters starting up. And back then, all the gill knitters were pretty much converted from, say, 6-cylinder engines to big American V8s. And vroom starts up, you know, and vroom, vroom. So whoever's ever started that engine up was revving the throttle up and down and up and down and up and down. And it went on for a long time. 30, 40 minutes up, down. It was Jack Wagner. He's sitting on the opener of Carol Ann, as I recall, that's the name of it. Named after his wife. And he was revving that engine up and down, up and down. And it was like, it was one of those sounds that was so soulful because I knew later what it meant. And he just loved the bay. And he loved machinery. And he loved being out on the water. He just loved that gill knitter. And it was really amazing. close with what I call standing on the mirror of the bay. And when I was about 15 years old, there was a bunch of us, I think Mark, Dave Waggart, Brian Kemmer, Eric possibly, John Downer and yourself, I just don't remember. But we would go up and we're scattering oysters up at, I know we were in the Tornado. I remember that brown Tornado that your granduncle owned, Fred, for a while. And we were out scattering oysters at Stackpole Slough. And to get out there, we had to cross a part of the slough in our hip boots. And I remember crossing thinking, boy, I hope we get back before the tide comes in too much, because it's kind of hard to cross. So we're working out about half a mile from shore, because we hiked out there, about a half dozen of us. And we're scattering, we're breaking and scattering, so if you find 2 oysters a patch, you break them and separate them. And all of a sudden, one of the guys said, hey, I think the tide's coming in. And I remember looking up, and you could see that tide coming in from about, I would guess, 500 feet away, you know, how it sort of shimmers, that edge comes in, and thinking, well, that's quite a ways away, there's not too much to worry about. Went back over, scattered oysters. Next thing I knew, I'm standing in the water. And I stood up, and I'm looking south, basically by southeast, Long Island, peninsula to the right, Long Island, and got a channel area, and Nasal Channel way over to the left. And there was no wind, it was dead quiet. It was like I was standing in this great mirror, and everything was reflected, and I was just standing there by myself. It was so amazing. It's one of those memories without sound that I will remember for a long, long time. Of course, what I'll also remember is getting water in my boots, crossing the back of the slough, because we had waited too long, and the slough was really deep. It's 10:52, I guess I've talked enough. So if you have any questions, I'm welcome to answer. So thank you.
Just keep going.
The birds, the big birds, all those like that.
Peacock.
Peacocks.
They're still at their sister's house. Kathleen's house.
Because of the neighbor has peacocks?
Well,
No, they're just there.
Michael and IU live above.
Wow.
And they're there all the time, and they land on the roof, bang around.
There used to be peacocks at Crangima too for years. I don't know if they're still there, but
Yeah,
I've seen them there.
Yeah, and I think that those that are near.
They're like a 25-pound turkey with beautiful wings.
Yeah. But they just showed up.
Yes, sir.
My name is Al Franklin, and thank you for your presentation, very well done. My question is about a mile south of here, on the right-hand side, there's a road called Joe John.
Yeah.
Have any information on that?
Yeah, it was named after a man named Joe Johns.
An Indian.
Yeah, and so I have a couple oddball observations about that road, I guess. So remember, there were not that many crossroads. Oysterville, Weather Beach Road, crossroad. Joe Johns Road, crossroad. Bay Avenue, crossroad. So those crossroads are really important to get from point A to B. And so I lived there on the farm called Buck Ridge Farm on the south side of the road, which is now all grown up in older trees. And our neighbors across the way, which Harry Simmons, ran a Martin Company farm. And so one day I was talking to Carl, who was one of their foremen, and Carl and he was discussing digging a ditch along Joe Johns Road. And he said, yeah, we got down there a few feet. We kept running into the ends of spruce limbs. And it triggered a memory, because my mom and stepdad had told me that when they had built Joe Johns Road, they had built the road by laying down mats of spruce limbs. Now, I gotta tell you, there's not 2 people in this room that can carry a spruce limb that's got a diameter like that, and it's like 35 feet long, because they're that heavy. They have a mass of needles and branches. What they do is they cross-link those, and then pour sand on them, and it formed a mat, so the sand wouldn't squish out. And so what they were doing is they were digging down on the edge of the road, and they were hitting those limbs, and it goes, since they were underwater, he said, we had to cut every one of those with a chainsaw, because they were perfectly preserved, because they were underwater, in the soil, in the groundwater, and there's no oxygen, so they can't rot, And I don't, Sydney, I don't actually know when that road was built. I'm guessing probably the 20s is what I would guess, but it could have been earlier than that. Like
so
many
Joe
roads.
Johns was a Native American?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And he had a house somewhere on Joe John's.
Okay.
What was his claim to fame? I mean, why did he get a road named after him?
You
Well,
need places
there.
by people.
That's what, he was the only one living on the road.
Oh,
So it's Joe John's
Joe
road.
John's Road. And most likely it was first built from the west, because that would have been the easy way to build it. Why? Because that's a little bit higher ground, where you come over the ridge there and drop down towards the east side. Boy, it was pretty swampy. The old USGS map showed lakes in that area. Pretty swampy. We had on our farm, on the west side of our farm, the peat soil was 6 feet deep. Peat, 6 feet deep. The west side was like that deep.
Jen, do
Jim.
you remember when they paved Joe John's and when they paved? Do you remember Bay Avenue being gravel?
No, but I do remember all the roads around Ocean Park in the late 50s were gravel, they weren't paved. Mom said they didn't actually get paved till about, gravel till about 51, 52. Up until then, Ocean Park was just a maze of little sand roads. There were no, what we call streets today. Dad said the highway from South Bend was gravel, 47, 48, 49. So it must have been after 50 they started making roads a little bit more durable. Dad said that Highway 101 that we know today had immense potholes in it. They had to drive a Model A around, for example. Their first paving was oil. Basically, they would oil the rock, and the rock would bind with the oil in it. They would put oil, rock, and oil, and that's was sort of what they call a macadam road. The oil was more of a thick tar than actually a road. Paving as we know it is more modern. Everything else was more like chip seal. That's a really good example. So, and we'd ride our bicycles all over that stuff. Yes?
I went on your stick in your mud.
Oh, gosh.
It was the best. Could you tell some people around here that don't know why those sticks are in the mud?
Sure. So when you're familiar, when you drive through Chinook and then you look out to the right and you're coming around Fort Columbia, you see all of these what look like fence posts in the water way out. Well, those are dominated by what are called the old track net sites. And the old track net sites were a quarter-mile run, typically a quarter-mile run of piling trees pounded in the mud, and then they would string a net on that, and the net is not a gill net. It's more like a seine net. The fish can't go through it or get caught. And so the fish who are coming into the river, if this is the seine net, they come to the net and their inclination is to turn right, and then they would go into what's called the trap, and then the heart of the trap, which was the impoundment area. And there the fishermen would lift daily what are called brails, and they would pull the fish out. Okay, Washington side, between Point Ellis, between the bridge, roughly, and Cape D, there was over 400 trap net sites. And each trap net, I figured out one time, probably 100 piling, so that's 40,000 piling out there. Now, back when those were put in, there were brand new trees. Well, after about 20, 30 years, the top of the piling that's up in the air and exposed to rain rots down to the salt water. And then it doesn't rot anymore. There, the teredos and boring organisms attack it. But because it's in the lower Columbia River estuary where there's a weird mix of salt and fresh water, neither the teredos, which are the boring worms, or the bacteria, the rot, get the upper hand. And so some of those piling are well over 100 years of age. And even at the Napton old sawmill site, there's thousands of piling there, and they're over 100 years of age. And you can look at the piling, and by looking at them, you can tell what they did and why they were there. They were a causeway to a dock, or they were a dock. They were an impoundment area for the saw logs, for example. And in some cases, the piling do represent another structure that was put in the 30s on the Columbia. And if you see piling really close together, and it looks like a fence, really, really close, like a picket fence, those are called pile dikes. And the pile dikes were put in by the Corps of Engineers in the late 30s, about 38, 37, to help direct the channel flow of the Columbia River. And there's about 6 of those, and they extend
from roughly the Sand Islands off Chinook all the way to just about Jetty A, which is the entrance to Oahu. So, yeah, those pilings are still there. Now, you know, another 100 years they'll be gone.
So who put them up? The
Individual fishermen.
fishermen, how the heck did they?
They use a pile driver. It has a 1-ton hammer that they winch up with a steam engine and then drop that. And so in the old days, this sound would have been heard all over the bay.
Did they have to claim a section?
They usually, supposedly the best records for all of the trap nets are held by the Army Corps of Engineers because those have been navigable waters, so they had to get a permit from the Corps to survey and locate the site of the trap net.
And you were telling us how wealthy the people that lived in Chinook.
Oh, the average wage in Chinook, like in 1882, 83, was like 15,000 per person. Oh, yeah. Because they harvested so much fish. Yeah.
You know, it's really low tide, you can still see the pilings of the road that went around the tunnel.
That road went to the point. And then the road made a hard right-hand turn, and the road then went through the fort. But it did not extend completely around the point. Yeah. The county built a dock there. And you can see, low tide, you can see the dock, which is what you're talking about. It went from the railroad line all to that point. And it met what's called the government dock, which was the dock that the military used to deliver arms and armament to Fort Columbia. And right where it met that dock, they put in a right-hand curve, and it then went right along. You've been to the theater at Fort Columbia? Yeah, that was the road, went right by the theater, and then it mixed up with the existing road system, which has been modified, and popped out somewhere by the tunnel. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. The county built that for that exact reason, and there's other roads there that are pretty fascinating too. So, yes, ma'am.
Did you have any experience with cougars when you were growing
No.
up? Were there cougars?
No, there are cougars at Cape D, been reported to Cape D. You have to ask, gosh, Todd, Eric, you might ask your dad if cougars are ever reported north. I don't remember cougars being reported north of.
Well, there were some last summer.
Well, I'm talking about back
Yeah.
50 years ago. You remember, there was a period we went through when bear hunting was very, very common. The bear population we have today is far more than it was when I was a kid. Bears were hunted, elk. There was never an elk herd at the north end of the peninsula. The farthest north the elk came was Litchfield Road, basically, thereabout. And I remember one day, I was on our farm and I saw these giant prints in the road of elk. Well, it turned out there were 2 elk that went from the south end of the beach all the way to the north end of the beach. And about 2 months later, I was up at Ledbetter Point on one of the Christmas bird counts. This would have been in the winter, after Christmas, and we saw 2 spike elk up at Ledbetter. There probably were 2 spike elk that came through our farm, but I had never heard of elk north of Ocean Park, ever, when I was a kid. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
So fun. Your ears are good.
If you want to have me talk about, economics and demographics, I can do that anytime, but this is a lot more fun.
Probably more interesting.